we made a reel where she and I are shaking hands, and it's a, you know, British Pakistani Muslim woman raised in Saudi Arabia, and then you have me, Costa Rican Polish American who's atheist, shaking hands. How in the world are two people from two completely different backgrounds getting together to not only work together but also co-found a company together?
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Hey, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest to introduce yourself. Sibu, please go ahead.
Hi, Maurice, and hello, listeners. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sibu Szymanowska. I'm a global citizen, entrepreneur, content creator, and I've been living and traveling around the world for the past 20 years.
And yeah, tell a bit about that. How did that come about? Was that something that, was stimulated as part of your upbringing? Where were you born anyway? And where did you go to school? Tell us about do you have any siblings, caretakers? Yeah, walk
So
us through that.
I'm mixed. So my mother's Costa Rican and my father's Polish. My father left as a refugee, left communist Poland as a refugee in the 1970s, and he gained asylum in the US, eventually became a US citizen. So he's Polish American. And from my mother's side, I'm Costa Rican. I was born in Costa Rica and I was mostly raised in Costa Rica, although we did have a few living stints in the US, Poland, and Mexico as well. But if people had to ask me, I think, well, for people with global multicultural backgrounds or people that have been raised in multiple places, I think we always have a short answer and a long answer depending on the context. And my short answer is I am Costa Rican. Long answer, Costa Rican Polish American. And if you ask me what I feel like a global citizen. So
Mm.
everywhere and nowhere is home.
Yeah, and I've had some conversations about this with previous guests as well, and it's something that I talk about with my kids also. We have lived, like you, around the world in different places. But where is home for you?
That's a great question. And that's the thing. So, most of my schooling was done in Costa Rica, but even when I was extremely young, I knew that I didn't fit in Costa Rica. And I know this sounds absolutely crazy, but from the age of 5 or 6, I knew I wanted to leave. And so, of course, I had to wait to grow up. And by the time I finished high school and I graduated from high school, I was 17 and I moved abroad to study. And that was the last time I lived in Costa Rica. I've been back, of course, to visit family, but for the most part, well, not for the most part. So that was 20 years ago. So I left in late 2005.
So, so where is home?
I don't know if I have a definition for home. And even now, it's something that I'm still searching for, basically. I don't know if I will ever get a chance to find it. And I'm coming to terms with the fact that no place is perfect, but I should probably pick one. So that's the journey I'm on right now. But Costa Rica definitely does not feel like home. I think home, it's a broad definition. I think home to me is more like people, but given that I was raised in a very multicultural environment where I'm the daughter of a migrant and a refugee, and my family, even my close family, growing up was already spread across multiple countries. So for me, growing up already meant missing people. It's not something that I chose. This was just the life that I was born into. So even if I was in Costa Rica, I was missing other family members. If I was in another country, then I was missing my mother and other family members as well. So home, there are multiple homes, but none of them feel truly like home.
Mm, okay. No, and I'm not surprised by that. The listeners have heard me say this. I mean, my kids say, home is wherever you guys are. So that means, their parents, right? And that, I'm also totally aware that that would change um, when they get their own families. So, okay, thanks for sharing that. Well, I would like to go back. You made a comment. It sounds strange, but around when I was 5 years old, I already knew that I would leave. Yeah, was there a moment or an
No. I mean,
experience or
I was very young. I don't think it was a definite moment or experience, but
yeah?
I just knew from a very young age that that just wasn't my place, and I was really young, and I just had to come to terms with that. And my parents are divorced, but while they were
Hmm.
together, I had a very loving um upbringing. My I think I loved spending time at home with my parents. I genuinely did. But even then I knew that Costa Rica wasn't the place that I was meant to be in.
You have any siblings?
I do. So my father has been married a few times, so I have quite a few half siblings. I'm closer to them now that I'm an adult. I wasn't particularly close to them when we were younger, and I have one full-blooded sister from both my mom and my dad's side. And she
Yeah.
lives in the UK actually. So
Okay.
like I said, we are pretty spread out.
So they also left Costa Rica.
So my mother's still in Costa Rica.
Okay.
Like I said, my father's Polish. So when they got divorced, my father left. He hasn't been back to Costa Rica since. So we would just visit him over the summer holidays. My half siblings are spread out in a couple of countries. Um, yeah, that's just the way things are.
Yeah. Um. So since you were young, you were exposed to a lot of different cultures, countries. So that's maybe where the whole traveling started with, right? So, what inspires you to turn travel into something transformative, not just for yourself, but also for others?
That's a great question. I think so. Travel, it's something that I've always been obsessed with the world. So from a young age, instead of going out to play, I would just sit at home and spend hours obsessed over encyclopedias, memorizing different countries and flags. And so I've always been obsessed with the world. And so for me to now be an adult and go to all these places that I read about growing up, and most importantly, learning about them. I've always been a geek. I'm a self-declared geek. And it's just the way travel can be extremely transformative, and I know for a fact that 100% has been for me. And this might sound cheesy for some, but I do believe travel has the power to change people and to transform the world. And if we were all to travel a little more, the world would truly be a better place. However, travel in itself is a privilege. And so I would love to set up an organization or a foundation right now, one day, where I could fund young people to travel and interact with people of other cultures, which is more or less what one of the organizations that I'm involved with, Acway, is doing. So I think I two things that fuel me and two things that I'm extremely passionate about are travel and human rights. And I somehow found the way to combine the two of them. And I founded social travel enterprise. I co-founded a social travel enterprise back in 2022. So we've been running for 3 years already. So um, we do tours, different group tours around the world, but we also do it from a humanitarian lens.
Yeah, that's hybrid tours, right?
Yes, correct. So the name of
Okay,
the company is the Hybrid Tours. Yes.
and for the attentive listeners, I spoke with your co-founder here a couple of episodes ago, so I definitely encourage folks, if you did not listen yet to that episode, to check that episode out as well. Um, Talking about the travel, was there for yourself? Was there a specific journey that changed how you saw yourself or your community?
So the reason we started the hybrid tours is because I've been
Hmm.
traveling for a very long time.
Yeah.
Not only I somehow managed to incorporate travel into my career as well, not just as a co-founder of a travel company, but I also do consultancies and I work as a tour manager. I freelance as a tour manager for other very important companies as well. So like travel is I eat, I breathe and live travel in the whole sense of the word. But if there's something that I realized was missing in the travel sphere was that I wasn't particularly seeing very culturally immersive experiences. And I think because of technology, we are very disconnected from people now that we travel. Like, we live in a bubble, everything's reachable. I remember back in the day when I used to have to go around and go to restaurants and talk to people, engage with people, knock from door to door to see if there was accommodation available. Travel used to be very different then. And I'm not saying it's not good now, because it is extremely accessible and easy, but that means that we're completely disconnected from people when we travel. I wanna go to a restaurant, I just look it up on Google. I wanna stay somewhere, I look it up on Google. I wanna book an activity, I go ahead and I book an activity. And so I'm basically slim picking the people that I will be engaging with. So maybe I'll take a free walking tour in a city and I'll be engaging with one local the whole time that I'm there. And that's it. So whatever happened to learning from locals, engaging from locals, listening what they have to say. And so I felt like travel has never been as accessible as it is right now, but it's also very, very disconnected in a way. And so here, my co-founder, this was before the pandemic actually. She organized a trip to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it was fascinating. I had never experienced travel in that way. It was absolutely beautiful because we were sightseeing and we were having fun, and going into this amazing culinary journey that is Bosnia and Herzegovina, because the food is incredible. If you haven't been, please do. But through Hira's contacts and through her organization's contacts, our World 2, we were actually able to meet with activists, war survivors, genocide survivors, and learn more about the country from people that had actually lived history. And so for me to hear about something that happened in the 90s, which wasn't long ago, not from a guide, but from someone that had actually lived through those experiences, that was priceless. And at the end of the day, I might have taken a tour of Bosnia and I was thrown a million facts. This was founded here, this was founded in this year. Realistically speaking, I'm not going to remember any of those things. What I will remember and what I will always carry with me are the stories and the learnings that I have directly from people. And so that trip that Hero organized, I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that such a thing could exist, and I already had experience in the travel industry, and I've also started two companies in the past, so I have a lot of experience in business development. So I reached out to Hira and I said, "Would you like to potentially take this to the next level and see if we can start a business?" Now, this was in 2019. Unfortunately, we all know what happened in 2020. So we had to put a pause to it, and then in 2022 we unofficially started. Things were going well, and we registered the company officially in 2023. Hybrid meaning it's an amalgamation of the best parts of both worlds. So education, recreation, humanitarian lens, sightseeing, all combined into one travel experience. That's why we call ourselves the hybrid tours.
Yeah, fascinating. I checked out your websites, and you what struck me is that you often talk about empowerment and perspective shifting. So, um, I have a question about empowerment. What does empowerment mean to you when it comes to travel?
Empowerment in this case, and we can also see this from a humanitarian
Hmm.
perspective, it's allowing locals to tell their own stories instead of me as the person bringing in the clients, deciding what the locals have to share. Who am I to tell a war survivor, a genocide survivor, and an activist which stories they should share? That's completely disrespectful. If anything, we're just empowering them and giving them a safe space for them to be able to share their stories on their terms. And I'm not saying that sometimes necessarily they're just going to want to talk about trauma. Like, we once met with a man that had been he was a child, but we met up with him and he told us about t- toys, the s- the sym- the symbolic meaning of toys, and how he couldn't believe that one day he was playing with kids who were of a different religion than him, and then from one day to the next he wasn't allowed to speak to them anymore, and then he was told that they were the enemy. And so these are the stories that people tell us, and so that empowers people. But most importantly, I have a we as a hybrid tours, we have a permanent partnership, completely permanent with our world too, meaning that everything we do, we try to do from an ethical lens. And it's the people that we engage with, they come first and their safety comes first. And something that we do in our tours when people sign up, for example, like we have a small disclaimer asking people, do they understand this? These are the people. So, for example, in when we go to Jordan, we meet with refugees and we might be meeting with not only might we be meeting with Palestinians, but we will be talking about Palestine because Jordan hosts the largest amount of Palestinians. And so we put it as a disclaimer. This tour is only suitable if you believe in the liberation of Palestine. If you agree, please type yes. And that's it. So that's all we ask. And so that basically filters people because at the end of the day, we want to be making sure that we're being respectful and allowing them to have a safe space to be able to talk about these things.
You've traveled extensively across Africa, um, and
Yes,
beyond.
I like to think I have.
That's what
Yes,
I
I've
understood when I was doing my little homework. So
uh yes,
what?
I've been to over 20 countries if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, what misconceptions about that particular continent or its people concern you most?
I think the fact that like all people think about when it comes to Africa is just I would say when I think of the Middle East, people think about and these are the perspectives that I have seen, especially as a content creator that makes content about all of my travels, right? Specifically as a solo female traveler. When I go to the Middle East, I encounter hate and questions about oppression and terrorism. And then when I go to Africa, to the continent of Africa, for the most part, I would say it's lack of safety and poverty. And so I think we even have this phrase, and I don't know if you had it growing up, like you need to eat all your food. There are children in Africa starving. Like that's just the phrase that I've heard across so many households, and so we have been ingrained with this idea that there's poverty in Africa, there's poverty in Africa, and is there poverty in Africa? There is, but there's also poverty in every single country in the world. And in some places, even in the UK, it's like what 10-20% of the population live below the living means. But we don't talk enough about that, right? We just focus on Africa. And if there's a reason why Africa, the continent of Africa in itself, is so impoverished, it's because colonizing powers, even now, even after these countries have become independent, continue to exploit and take advantage of these countries. And so earlier this year, I was traveling in West Africa and just to see and learn firsthand about how much continues to happen, how much these countries continue to be exploited in the year 2025 is absolutely crazy. But we don't talk enough about these things, right?
Mm. I mean, before I ask you a follow-up question on that, I mean, just because you asked me, I don't know about you growing up, about the example of finishing your plate. Yes, I had to finish my plate, but my parents had themselves experienced, no food because they had been in camps during Second World War in Indonesia, so they knew, how it is to have no food or little food. Um, I would like to build on that in terms of misconceptions and narrative. Um, where do you find hope when you see how young Africans are redefining global narratives? And I know Africa's an enormous continent, but my point is, yes, you're right. There are a lot of misconceptions, particularly about that continent. While traveling through that, um, through those different countries, I'm assuming because also, as a person that is part of Akwe and, you're a young person yourself or a relatively young person yourself, what do you see the young Africans doing, especially around changing that narrative that gives you hope?
I think it's interesting because you will encounter people that have hope, that are doing something to go against that narrative. And so I met a quite a few extremely inspirational people, but there's one man specifically that we met through couch surfing, and this man, he was 35. He was 2 years younger than me, and so one day we're driving back. He'd taken us out to the beach out of his own free will. We were staying in his home, no expectations, nothing. He was an amazing host. And we're driving back, and the person I'm traveling with, a female friend, she's asleep, and I'm talking to him, and he's driving, and he's telling me about how he was a child soldier. And they raided his village, and he was forced to be a child soldier, and they kidnapped him and his father, and then his father escaped but couldn't find him, so he had to stay behind. And so I cannot even imagine the amount of PTSD, but the crazy. And so this boy is telling me his stories, and I'm thinking to myself, you and I are practically the same age. I was basically playing with Barbies while you were serving as a child soldier in your country and forced to do horrible things. It took him years to be able to finish studying, but he knew that it was important for him to finish studying despite the PTSD, despite everything he'd been through. And so now I met him, and he runs 2 schools. He built 2 schools from scratch, in the slums, and he's providing free education for people in the slums, and then he's also providing agricultural education for people in his village specifically. Oh, and he built a 3rd school now that I think about it. So kids in his village had to walk up to 4 hours every day to go to school. He built a school nearby, very basic. Now the kids only have to walk about half an hour. And so it's this, right? A person that has absolutely nothing and has gone through the most horrible trauma, things that you and I cannot even begin to imagine. And they decided to not only turn their lives around, but also help the people around him and try to make a difference. And so I'm not saying that, I mean, and these are, we see this everywhere, right? Like it's not exclusive. This was in Sierra Leone. This is not exclusive to Sierra Leone. There are people like this everywhere, but there are some people who perhaps might be more optimistic and want to improve not only their lives but the lives of those around them. And so I met a few people like this, definitely, but then there were other people who had perhaps lost hope, and the way they expressed everything, they said, well, I mean, the government's corrupt and it feels like we're living in some sort of vicious cycle. And then of course, countries continue to be exploited by France, for example, which is the country that's doing the most harm in the region right now. So it's just interesting to see both sides, and to learn more about what's happening from both perspectives, basically. But it was a beautiful trip, and I learned so much. But I think the main thing about that trip is that I think it's easy to feel hopeless at times, especially with the state of the world and how much information we're bombarded with every single day. But I think that specific trip, me traveling alone through what is described as one of the most difficult and dangerous regions in the world, it just gave me hope. Not just, it gave me hope in humanity. It genuinely did, because of how incredible people were to me without expecting or asking absolutely anything in return, just because they felt like it.
Thanks for sharing that, Sibu. And when you travel, so yeah, I mean, you make it clear you meet a lot of young folks through your travel initiatives. Um, what spiritual or reflective practices do you notice emerging among youth travelers today? And the reason that I'm asking is, it's a topic that um, I often talk about. Well, when I'm doing my 100-mile walk, and you get pain in your knees, you think, well, what's the purpose of life? Why am I doing this? And then with if I'm accompanied by other walkers, we often then go towards, oh, it seems that this younger generation is, less interested in institutionalized religion. But again, that's not true in every part of the world, maybe more in Western parts, although the latest data now shows that there is a group of younger folks that is going again to more institutionalized religion. So anyway, my question to you is: do you see, yeah, what type of spiritual and reflective practices do you notice emerging while you're on the road?
I think it really depends on the region, but
Hmm.
Africa specifically, they have a very, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Christianity is the largest growing religion in the African continent right now. And so when I was there, we actually encountered a couple of people who were coming in from North America or Western Europe who were actually funding churches. I'm personally not a big fan of institutionalized religion. I'm Costa Rican, Polish. Both countries are extremely, extremely Catholic, and I think they take things like anything in the world. I think extremism is bad. Um, and I feel like these two countries specifically take religion to an extreme, and I feel like the younger generations, and like I said, it really depends on the region. If I'm speaking to people in the Americas or Europe, a lot of young people are losing faith in institutionalized religion, while maybe in Africa it's taking a stronger hold on the population, basically. But it's interesting to I think beyond institutionalized religion, I feel I want people to feel empowered, no matter what their age is, to feel like they have freedom of religion and freedom to pursue whatever belief they want to believe in. And I think that could be one of the keys to stop all of this hate going on around the world. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I joined the organization of Acquay, where we basically are an interfaith dialogue organization. And we have people from all different religions coming together talking about peace building and trust building, and basically how can we work together, because religions are here. They're here to stay. They're not going anywhere, at least not in our lifetime. And the best we can do is learn how to not tolerate, because I don't like the word tolerate. I think tolerate has a negative connotation. Tolerate to me means like it's like you're putting up with something that you don't even want to accept in the first place. I think it's understanding that the point that we want to reach, understanding and respect for one another. And I think that's the beautiful thing of Acquay. I'm atheist, and yet I believe in freedom of expression and religion, and I believe that people should be able to pursue any religion that they want to believe in, as long as they're respectful of others.
I thank you for sharing that. What maybe also myself as well as the listeners would be interested hearing from you, because you're very active as part of Agway, which is an interfaith type of movement, right? You participated in the Interfaith G20 forum as well. And then you just shared that you're atheist. So why? Yeah, explain a little bit more in terms of why would you then be part of those type of discussions, and what do you think is the purpose of the Interfaith G20, and is it trying to be, is it successful in its efforts, do you think?
So I'll start with the G20. There's a phrase that I don't know if you heard,
Hmm.
no action, talk only, NATO. So a lot of these organizations, and don't get me wrong, it was beautiful to be there and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, but a lot of these larger forums and conferences a lot of the times feel like very performative. We talk, but we don't act on what we talk, and we create reports, but we rarely act upon those reports. But the reason I love being a part of Acquay is because it goes beyond reports and talking, like it's actual activism, supporting young adults all around the world from all different backgrounds to do grassroots, to work in grassroots organizations and do activism on the ground. And what I love about it is that we don't ex- we don't enforce our beliefs and what we believe would be best for each community that people join us from. Basically, we trust people on the ground to know what works best in their community. I cannot expect to know what works in your community if I've never even been to your community or if I've only visited it once. And I think that's one of the biggest problems of humanitarian aid right now, where we just impose what we think is best for people and we don't do any kind of localized activities or even involve local actors in the process. And one of the reasons why I love being part of Aqua is because of that. But most importantly, yes, I am atheist, and I never thought I could find a space in which I could basically be respected for my lack of beliefs and yet be invited to these spaces where I could actually do activism and empower others to feel like they're, like I said before, to feel like they have freedom of religion, because I do believe that's extremely important. Whether or not I believe in what the other person is doing or I believe in their faith or their God, that is completely irrelevant. I should be able to respect others and respect their opinions and their beliefs. But surprisingly, growing up, we were raised in an agnostic environment, my sister and I, in Costa Rica, which is very rare considering my father is from a very Catholic family, so is my mother's family. And so for us to be raised, even without being baptized, we actually encounter a lot of hate and bullying growing up simply because we were not baptized. And so from a young age, I was like, okay, why am I being attacked for not believing in something? And then when I was 17, I moved to China and I was there for 7 years. That's where I did my bachelor's degree. And in China, I speak Chinese, but obviously I speak it with an accent. And I have a very ethnically ambiguous face. So people thought I was an Uyghur, meaning that they thought I was from Western China, from one of the Muslim communities. And in China, I was discriminated against because people thought I was Muslim. And so growing up, I'm not even 20 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why am I encountering so much hate for something that I'm not even a part of? And so that helped me be in other people's shoes. And I was thinking to myself, if this is the amount of hate that I'm encountering, and I'm not even part of any organized religion, how bad could it possibly be for other people? And so I think that started building up certain levels of empathy um towards other people, especially people of other religions.
What I think is great is that you know you are not afraid to then be you know to um to be part of communities that might have other thoughts, about life and spirituality, etc. That you still go and converse with them, connect, because I think that's one of the problems that we have in this world is that
A hundred
there's
percent.
a lot of polarization, and okay, they think differently, or they are religious, I'm not, or they are white, I'm not, all of that. So I um I think that's wonderful. What I try to do with this podcast is also connect people, because I think that's necessary. And then when you connect, hopefully, dialogue will start. And an important part of dialogue is listening to each other. Um, so I hope that this podcast is contributing a little bit to that. Um, so the way I also try to tackle that is to ask the previous guest to have a question for the next guest. And this is interesting because you are answering a question that Hiram said.
Oh, okay, nice.
Is if you had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with someone who has passed away, who is still alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, well, that's a great one. I was thinking of an activist, but you know what? There's a person that has inspired me since I was a little girl, and I think that's the person I'd like to ask a question. So I'm probably I know we do. I know your podcast you talk a lot about um humanitarianism and you talk with other people working in this field, but I'm gonna go a little bit differently there. I've always loved reading from a very young age, and she's still alive. I don't know for how long though. She's from Chile, and she had to flee her country for a long time, and then she went back, and she is a very well-renowned author, or her name is Isabel Allende. She has had her books published in multiple countries, movies, etc., but not only am I super inspired by her writing, but also her life story in itself. So I think if I could meet anybody, a writer specifically would be her.
Great. Beautiful. Um, yeah, your question for the next guest.
A lot of people feel like they're losing hope. If somebody were to begin in the world of activism or doing some sort of humanitarian work in their community, what kind of suggestions would you give to them?
You know, music is very important to me. So I always have a question about music as well. And a lot of my guests consider what I'm going to ask you now as the most difficult question I'm always asking. But I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, so if I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that best embodies who you are, what you are about, for a big part, of course, um, which song or piece of music would that be and why?
I love music. There's so many out there. But I think there's one that's particularly made an impact on me over the last few years. I don't know if it's well known or not. It's purely instrumental, but I think it has more of a modern vibe to it. It's called Groundhog Day by Lane 8. And if I'm watching a sunrise on my own, this is the song that I will actually play. And so the song starts in a very quiet way, and it feels like it's like it feels like somebody's coming out of hibernation. And I feel like that's what a lot of my life has been like, where I think when we're younger, we're trying to find ourselves and the right path to take on. And I feel like at the beginning, um, especially my late teens, early 20s, I felt very, very lost regarding who I was, my identity, the kind of person that I should be. And now that I'm older, I feel like I'm finding that, and I'm very, very happy with the person I'm becoming. And so that song very much I feel like it symbolizes my path well.
Great. And I will add that song to a playlist on Spotify. We developed a playlist. If you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you will find all the songs that have been picked by the guests on this podcast. And that is very diverse, as you can imagine,
I can imagine,
from
yes.
classical to, heavy metal to jazz
I'll
and
definitely be adding it to my
name it.
playlist.
Great. Um, I always try to talk about the sustainable development goals as well, Sibu, and because for me it's not perfect, but at least it's an attempt from the world to say, hey, we need to do something together to make this world more sustainable and just. Um, I normally ask, okay, what do you want the listeners to know about the SDGs? But my question for you is a little bit different, and not to make your life difficult. But I think the question I'm going to ask is probably on the mind of many of my listeners, because I have quite some folks who are active around climate justice, etc. So my question to you around the SDGs and related also with your work and what you do is, so the travel industry has an enormous environmental and social footprint. So
Correct.
how do you think responsible travel can support the SDGs, especially in terms of reducing inequality and promoting gender equity?
So, if my co-founder Hira was just at a conference in Saudi Arabia, and they were talking about the latest stats. As of right now, 11% of the world's GDP is thanks to tourism. It has a massive, massive impact on the world. And I know it's slowed down because of COVID, but it's definitely picking up again. And I think in many places it's scary to see the path that tourism is taking, but I think a lot of that is due to lack of policies, guidelines from governments on the one side, and then on the other hand, having large corporations exploit places, people specifically, and not have any regards whatsoever towards the social and environmental impact that they're having on certain populations. So I think travel is the one tool out there that can not only transform your life, but the life of others in a positive way if done right. I mean, what other thing could you possibly do that where you're spending money to have fun and that money directly helps other people wherever you are? And if done right, it allows you to connect and to build bridges and to break stereotypes. And so, as someone who works in the travel industry and someone who works specifically in the ethical travel space, I do believe that travel truly has the power to change lives. And I know this sounds difficult to believe given the current climate. If you look at Barcelona, for example, Barcelona, Bali, the over tourism happening, the problems with over tourism are terrible. But if there's one fact that I want to give every that I want to give to those listening to this is that 80% of worldwide travelers visit 10 to 20% of the world. Let me repeat that. 80% of the travelers visit 10 to 20% of the world. We all keep going to the same places, the same destinations over and over and over again. And so it's up to us as well as consumers to actually broaden our horizons and try to go to other places. And I've seen this over and over again. Uzbekistan 10 years ago, nobody in their minds would have even thought about going to Uzbekistan. Colombia, a lot of countries are picking up in popularity, and I see this over and over again. So why not push yourself to go to a place that is not even trendy yet, but it might be in a few years? Go where people haven't been yet, so you can actually say, "Oh, I was there before everybody else was." Push yourself, go out of your comfort zone. Use the everywhere, anywhere feature on Google Flights and Scanner and let the algorithm surprise you. That's one of the best ways for to travel, at least, not to let my mind pick a destination, but let the algorithm pick a destination. And who knows, I'll go to a random place I would have never thought of before, and my mind will be completely blown away and things might change and it might be the most transformative trip ever. Another stat before we go that we heard, a woman representing the Italian Ministry of Tourism, of course, Italy over tourism. And then she said, well, all the tourists are visiting 4%, 4% of the destinations in Italy. 4%. That means 96% of the country is just out there waiting for people to arrive. And so if you're going somewhere touristy, push yourself to go somewhere new, go off the beaten path, go explore you don't need a place to be trendy in order to determine that it's actually worth going to. I think that would be my main message. And as someone who has been traveling full time for the last 5+ years, I can tell you that there are just so many beautiful places just waiting to be explored, basically. Not discovered, because I don't like that term, but just waiting to be explored where you won't find anybody shooting water guns at you. If anything, you'll find people out there welcoming you and waiting for you with open arms because they rarely see tourists. And those are the kind of travel experiences that you want to have. And they're not going to be around for long.
You know, basically, what you're also alluding to is that we need to change systems and structures, and that's also then related to the SDGs. One of the challenges, maybe, and a growing group of people is saying that is, why we are not able to change those systems and structures, those things that we all do. Um, has to do with that we did not pay proper attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community. And as a result of those discussions and that finding or that observation, the inner development goals were developed. I have a question around that. I mean, one is, have you heard about the inner development goals? One, and second, if you did not, or if you did, um, you know, which of the qualities, because, there are 5 inner development goals and there are 25 skills like humility, empathy, etc. Which of these skills resonate most with how you travel and lead? So, two questions.
So the first one, when I think about IDGs, I actually, because of Acquay, I actually think about the interfaith development goals. So we have the same acronym for them. So I heard about the inner development goals through your podcast, actually. That's the first time I actually got to hear about them. But I think off the top of my mind, I don't remember all 25 of them, of course. I think empathy is extremely important. However, I feel like empathy is not something that can necessarily be taught. Um, Especially, I've seen children be racist towards other children. You do not learn racism on your own. This is something that you learn because of your environment. And so, how can we trust people to be empathetic and then to teach empathy to the people around them? My The thing with the inner development goals specifically is that for us working in this field, it feels like something palpable. Like if I read the inner development goals, it feels like this is something that I can achieve or that I can incorporate into my life. But if I have no experience whatsoever in the humanitarian field, if I have not, I've never been, if I've never been an activist, if I'm completely new, then how do you incorporate any of those frameworks into your life? That's the difficult part. I think you need to have someone bring you into this world before you actually learn it on your own. And I think that's the most difficult part to implement because people want to incorporate these if they even knew about them. But if they do, how do they even start? I think that's the most difficult part here.
I would like to go quickly back to hybrid tours. And so, we talked about that I spoke with your co-founder Hira on the same podcast. I spoke with her about the social impact through travel. Um, Actually, yeah, no, let me rephrase. What would you say? Because I'm really fascinated by your company, but so I want the
Thank you.
people to know about it. But what would you say you and Hira bring different? Um, yeah, what type of different energies or philosophies do you bring to the company? And how do those differences, if there are any, strengthen the vision?
I think, first of all, we're the only company out there founded by humanitarians. That is the foundation of the work that we do. And none of this would be possible if we didn't have the social impact in mind. Like I said, the people that we encountered, those are our priority, first and foremost. But what we're building here is not, we're not just offering tours, we're building a community of like-minded individuals who care about the world, who want to travel and see the world from a different lens that we've normally been taught. And we do this through so many different ways. So we're basically traveling through storytelling, we're decolonizing travel. We are teaching the people that we encounter, they're teaching history that we were not taught in books, that none of us know about, that is actually relevant to all of us because the events and incidents that we talk about have had an impact on the whole of the world, but we don't know about any of this. And so for me to go on a hybrid tour is fascinating. But when I go on a hybrid tour with people who are going on their first hybrid tour, to see the transformation over the course of a week is absolutely incredible, to be honest. And so these are people that maybe had an inkling of what the world was like. But then as the days go on, you can see them gaining more confidence, asking more questions. And then towards the end, they're taking notes and going back and trying to see what kind of books and movies they can read about different topics. And so these are people that that are in no way involved in the humanitarian sector, and yet they want to learn more about it. And that's the beauty of it, because realistically speaking, you, Maurice, and all many of the people that you've had on the podcast, we're all part of the same sphere, right? But then how do you reach people who aren't and yet want to learn about these topics as well? And travel is a great way to do it. And so for us to be able to take people on that transformative experience is amazing, but also ask uncomfortable we ask not just each other but also ourselves uncomfortable questions that we've probably never had to deal with before, because our trips are not just it's not just about sightseeing. It truly isn't. It's about learning from locals, unlearning many things that we were taught before, and hopefully leaving with a little seed, a little idea planted about how you can travel differently and how much of an impact you can have on others if you decide to travel in a different way.
No, and again, I think it's really, fascinating um, philosophy and what you're trying to bring. I think it's also powerful. Um, I would like to go back though. Is that do you think Hira and you bring a similar type of energy and philosophy, or is it different and but complementary? So how do you see that?
I think it's interesting because we're talking I'm a content creator, and so we made a reel where she and I are shaking hands, and it's a, you know, British Pakistani Muslim woman raised in Saudi Arabia, and then you have me, Costa Rican Polish American who's atheist, shaking hands. How in the world are two people from two completely different backgrounds getting together to not only work together but also co-found a company together? And I think we come from extremely different backgrounds, and yet I think it's our shared values and mission in life and the way that we see the world that has basically brought us together. And I think that's priceless. And so I think my experience with here and with so many people, because I've had the opportunity to meet so many people over the last 20 years that come from completely different backgrounds, um, than mine. But I think the ultimate lesson here is that we're more alike than we truly think we are.
Sibu, these conversations always go fast. But before I thank you for today, is there any question that I did not ask you, but I should have asked you?
I think, I mean, obviously we had a limited amount of time, but I like I mentioned before, I didn't get a chance to talk about this before, but I don't only do work through the hybrid tours, but I also try to reach a completely different audience through content creation. And I'm a content creator. If anybody wants to find me and come follow, you can find me under Go Global with Sibu. That's Sibu. And what I do here is I show what life is like as a full-time traveler, solo full-time traveler, because I travel on my own. And I want to show the world I want to show what it's like to travel from not only a female lens, which is pretty rare, but also to show people what it's like to see more off the beaten path destinations and destinations that people don't normally visit. And because of my humanitarian background, here and I studied together. We did our master's degree together. And so I also bring in human rights and geopolitics into the stories and content that I create. And so it's in I love the work that I do through content creation, and it allows me to share the world from like a more informed intellectual perspective while still including travel as well. So it's educational but lighthearted content. I guess that's the way I would call it. And for me to get messages from people like, "Oh, I would have never even thought of visiting this country and now it's on my radar because of you," or maybe I'll never go to this country, but now I know that it's different and that it's not dangerous the way it's portrayed in the media, or I would have never expected to see such beauty through those stories that you've been telling. For me, that's priceless. And so maybe people, not everybody has the privilege to travel, but many of us have smartphones and we're able to see the world through a screen. And so if I can share those stories And it goes beyond showing pretty pictures and pretty views. If I can share stories of people and what the world is like, that really fills my heart. It truly does.
People thank you so much for today. Yeah, wish you all the best with everything you do. I really admire your drive and yeah, I do think that I really encourage the listeners to check out, your companies and reach out to you and experience it. Um, yeah, and thank you for who you are. So all the best.
Maurice, thank you so much for having me. And I truly hope we'll cross paths sometime soon at another forum. I really do. I'm sure we will.
We will. I'm also sure about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.